What you see here is actually not near the entrenched racist behavior in the Arab world. The matter of the fact is that racism is, and always has been, deeply ingrained into Arab communities. The Arab slave trade is a fact of history, a sad fact, and anti-black racism is a fact of current reality, a sad reality. These are shameful affairs that must be confronted.
So, I've lived in Dubai for almost 8 years. I did my high school here, my national diploma, my bachelor's, my master's here in Dubai. I had my child here, everything. And every single time I've been disrespected in this country, it's been coming from the low-budgeted Arabs. By that I mean it's coming from the Egyptians, the Lebanese people, the Iraqis, with Pakistani, Bangladesh, whatever, that community, you know, those are the ones that discriminate black people in this country. You people that discriminate black people and make Dubai look like it's racist and they discriminate against black people, but it's coming from the low-budget Arabs and the Indians. Why are you so comfortable to do that?
The low-esteemed poor Arabs from Turkey, from Bangladesh, from Nepal, those people are the worst at treating black people like shit, and it needs to get into the light. We need to stop hiding. African people, stop hiding. This is something that is affecting us. The reason why we concentrate a lot on white racism, white people, white colonialist, white history is because of black Americans. They are living in a place where there is majority of white governance, white rules, white regulations, white people. So they are oppressed by white people and they speak about white people. And we Africans, on the other hand, are oppressed by the Arabs, by the Asians, but we don't speak about it. And also when you come out and speak about it, people want you to keep quiet.
I posted the other video about racism in the UAE and I saw so many comments. I wish I could go through all of them. It's very sad that all of us are experiencing the same thing just because of our skin color.
The energy that we put on white people is the same energy we should be putting on these Arabs, these Asians that are treating us as shit.
But what triggered me to post that video was because I've been trying to secure an apartment here in Sharjah, but I've not been able to. Not because I could not afford it, but just because I'm black. Real estate agents in Sharjah will not give an apartment to a black family. Just because we're black, they will not give us a home. There's a new rule in Sharjah by the real estate company saying no Africans.
Humanity has truly never known the hatred, malice, and annihilation of greater magnitude, savagery, or longevity than that which has been perpetrated against the peoples of Africa. For instance, what can one make of UK Conservatives' top donor Frank Hester speaking of hating all black women in a public space? One never stops to wonder where such hate could find the pride of airing itself before the global hearing of all kinds of peoples and tongues. What is behind it? It is the hardest thing to come to grips with. This was just days ago, this month of March, when the Frank Hester affair was rekindled. The Guardian newspaper had quoted Frank Hester as referring to Diane Abbott, who became the first black woman to be elected to the Parliament of the United Kingdom when she won a seat in 1987. Frank Hester, it was said, had uttered the extremist statement a few years ago that looking at the country's longest-serving black lawmaker, Diane Abbott, made him want to hate all black women, and she should be shot.
Just like that.
Just like that?
The fact that there are black people out there who don't know that anti-blackness is global is ridiculous. Like, wake the hell up, ya.
Such an extremist statement of hate, coming from none other but one of UK Conservatives' top donors, about a fellow human being like himself who had obviously done nothing wrong.
This calls for very serious brooding concerning how we ought to regard and relate with one another as one humanity and as one race.
This calls for some very serious state of careful deliberation on what has to go on or what has to come to a permanent halt.
Abbott, the age of 70, had issued a statement in response saying that Hester's remarks were alarming for a public figure who is a visible presence in the community because she doesn't have a car and regularly walks or takes the bus. "It is frightening," Abbott said. "I am a single woman, and that makes me vulnerable anyway. But to hear someone talking like this is worrying." Other persons of high status had also expressed disapproval. The Minister for Women and Equalities, Kemi Badenoch, was one of those who had spoken up. Thus, she had tweeted in a post on X, Hester's 2019 comments, as reported, were racist. Abbott and I disagree on a lot, but the idea of linking criticism of her to being a black woman is appalling. Although Hester had said that he tried to apologize to Abbott and accepted that the statement he made concerning her person in that private meeting years ago was rude, but his criticism had nothing to do with either her gender or color of skin, it is impossible to really ascertain the truth of this assertion. However, that is just one instance amongst a dozen tons of other instances of hateful treatment being directed at black people on a daily basis all over the world. Which brings us to the basics of today's video, examining how Arabs are the most racist against blacks.
They come to our own hostel to disturb people who are praying. This is really unacceptable. This is
We came to India here to study. Now we are being attacked just because this is time for Ramadan and Muslims who are praying, not even Christians. There have been existing Muslims here in India, but none of them talks about this. Why only the African students?
We will be exposing works, thought forms, lineage behavior of racist Arabians towards black people, and the acrimonious tendencies the black community amongst them are being beset with for as long as anyone can remember. Before we delve right into this proper, as always, don't you forget to encourage our works by simply hitting that like button in front of you, share with your friends and families to keep spreading our eye-opening black narrative, and kindly subscribe to stay on with us for more, while you help as well in building the rising membership of this channel. We are delighted to have you with us. Still on the affairs of racism around the globe, more than a dozen men have recently attacked international students who were performing Ramadan prayers at their Gujarat University accommodation in India over 48 hours ago. G.S. Malik, the police commissioner of Ahmedabad City, told reporters that around 24 people entered the hostel on Saturday night and objected to the African students offering prayers, asking them to do so in a mosque.
They come to our own hostel to disturb people who are praying. This is really unacceptable. This is
We came to India here to study. Now we are being attacked just because this is time for Ramadan and Muslims who are praying, not even Christians. There have been existing Muslims here in India, but none of them talks about this. Why only the African students? Now they are breaking down the bicycles, the bikes, everything is being demolished down. Imagine bikes people costed for. These guys have been hiding the racism and all that. Today they have really shown their true color. There's no one, the police are not responding.
Look, this is how they attack.
Navid Siddiq, a student from Afghanistan who was injured in the attack, told the Times of India newspaper that he and other students were offering Taraweeh, a special nightly prayer occurring during Ramadan, when 3 people entered the hostel and began questioning them. An argument ensued, and they had returned with a larger mob armed with stones, iron pipes, and attacked us. They went on a rampage in the hostel, assaulting students in their rooms and damaging property and vehicles, he told the newspaper. This is just another one of those events born of division and separatism that we still have not stopped seeing happen amongst us every once in a while. Only this time it is happening in India. But it is, and has always been, about that same mindset that all humanity would unanimously have to expunge from her midst for the words unity and oneness to be achieved. However, in the Arab world, worst case racism exists. People with dark skin are seriously discriminated against and often see their rights curtailed. Racism is a virus that has embedded itself into the heart and soul of Arab communities, thriving on ignorant perpetuation. Many Arabs don't feel compelled to question their bigotry because it has been so deeply ingrained into our cultural hegemony that it has become second nature, says the Arabian Janine al-Shalabi, a speaker and writer. Take a quick flick through some Arab TV channels. The only time you would see people with darker skin tones was when they were portrayed as servants or villains. Ideally, the actors had porcelain skin that glistened on screen, despite the fact that in the US alone, 20% of the Muslim population is black. TV constructed an unobtainable beauty standard for the Arab population, teaching them to equate dignity with Eurocentrism. And it doesn't stop there. Growing up, many Arab children would have been introduced to a desert called Ras Ilabed, which literally translates to the head of the slave. This dessert is composed of a marshmallow center dipped in chocolate, said to resemble the head of a slave due to its dark color. Thousands enjoyed this sweet without caring to confront its racist origins. The examples provided so far may seem like mere jokes or meager coincidences, but the actuality is, these insignificant occurrences are indicators of larger webs of underlying prejudice that can easily spawn into something much bigger and much more horrifying. Let's hear what a Namibian who works in Turkey has to say about this. I am a Namibian living and working in Turkey. Being the only Black and African person here who's ever worked here, the pressure is so much. You need to have a thick skin to remain in a similar setting. The jokes they make, the kind of questions they ask, the privileges given to the Turks, the looks you get from colleagues and outside people when you go to the shops to buy something, the trips you take on public transportations, and how everyone looks at you with disgusted faces, how no one wants to sit or stand close to you. To anyone going through this, be strong and be financially responsible, and go back home and invest your money back home, where you won't ever feel like you are useless or unimportant. While that was a very touching experience from our Namibian brother, this racist attitude has become even more prevalent in Arab countries for the most reason that Arab governments, particularly those that import foreign labor from Africa and Southeast Asia, have failed to implement or enforce anti-discrimination and anti-exploitation laws. North Africa's whites came to look upon blacks as an abject race of slaves and treated them accordingly. Tuaregs utilized superior arms, transport, fear, intimidation, and their knowledge of the vast Sahara and control of Saharan resources to rule and exploit enslaved blacks, known as escalate. Under rising nomadic power, both Arabic-speaking and Berber-speaking pastoralists began to use racial identity as a more explicitly ideological justification of their position of domination over sedentary communities. The common feature in the emerging color-coded schemes of social status and identity in the Sahara was the negative and servile connotation of blackness. Thus, in the period just prior to European colonization, race functioned primarily as a legitimization of domination and enslavement of people defined as black. Along these lines, local Arabo-Berber intellectuals in the Sahara rewrote the history of relations between their ancestors and Black Africans in a way that made them, in addition to rightful slave masters of blacks, the bearers of Islamic orthodoxy and holders of religious authority. In the northern zone, enslaved blacks were exploited as domestic servants, concubines, and porters, and even as elite Praetorian guards under Morocco's Moulay Ismail, 1672 to 1727. Across northern Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, and Libya, domestic, household slavery predominated. Master-slave relations tended to be face-to-face and relatively more humane than the hereditary chattel slavery found in the vast Sahara. Slavery and anti-black racism has been and continues to be harsher in Saharan zones. A slave mode of economic production emerged on the backs of enslaved blacks. When slavery dominates economic production, it takes a crueler form. In the Sahara, brutally enforced, racialized, hereditary chattel slavery emerged. In contrast, in northern zones of the Maghreb, enslaved blacks were mainly exploited as domestic servants and concubines. In warmer, face-to-face interactions, the labor of enslaved black Africans made the Sahara habitable. The initial wells and irrigation in the Sahara were dug and operated by slave labor. Enslaved blacks dug and tended wells, excavated and maintained the underground channels of Foggara, irrigated gardens, cultivated dates, and tended flocks. The arduous and relentless work to irrigate in a desert included digging channels tens of feet into the sand, with the risk of being drowned under it. The oases across the Saharan zones of North African countries still reveal remnants of a racialized slave mode of production. The same is true for parts of the Sahara, loosely controlled by states. When it comes to the examples of anti-blackness in the Arab world, it really doesn't take much searching to see it. Mafaz al-Suwaidan, a PhD student in Harvard's Committee on the Study of Religion program, said in a meeting. She mentioned that racism is embedded in certain words in the language, the interactions with a predominantly migrant class, whether that be non-Khaliji Arabs or non-Arabs, and the way people treat their domestic workers. She referred to the kafala system that limits workers' freedom, leaving them vulnerable to exploitation and violation of their rights. In many Arab nations, black workers are lured into menial jobs where their passports are confiscated upon arrival, and they are forced into humiliating and often inhuman working conditions. They have little to no protection under the law and are particularly vulnerable to exploitation, including extraordinarily long working hours, withholding of salaries, sexual, mental, and physical abuse, and denial of travel. The recent case of Alem Dechesa brought to light the horrors faced by migrant workers in Lebanon. Dechesa, a domestic worker from Ethiopia, had committed suicide after suffering terrible mental and physical abuse at the hands of her Lebanese employers, whose savage beating of her in front of the Ethiopian consulate in a video had gone viral years ago. A few activists in some of these places have had enough of such treatments and are starting to rise up. The greatest progress so far has been made in Tunisia. Tunisia is the first Arab country to have passed an anti-racism law. An intense discussion about racism emerged there after the 2011 revolution. It resulted from a vibrant civil society making use of the freedom of expression. In October 2018, the Tunisian parliament passed a law that defined racism and made racist statements and deeds punishable by law. Yet, even in Tunisia, many rights activists say there has been little progress in turning legislation into reality. To me, there's no change, says Kenza Benazouz, who researches discrimination in Tunisia. We don't talk about race. We don't have data based on race. We don't want to acknowledge it. Passing a law is not enough. Kaula Ksiksi, the co-founder of the Voices of Tunisian Black Women, says the law only exists on paper, since victims of discrimination and racist attacks don't have the means to take lengthy and costly legal action against perpetrators. According to her, there is still not enough political will to implement the national strategy that the law envisions. Ksiksi is a lawyer and says she dreams of seeing pictures of black children in textbooks and black Tunisians assume top posts in the government and the courts. Roughly 10% to 15% of Tunisians are black, many of them descended from slaves, analysts say. While Tunisia became the first Arab country to ban slavery in the 19th century, its legacy remains tangled in Arabic slurs that refer to black people as slaves and in complicated community relationships, especially in the South. Reem Garfi's maternal relatives came from Sudan, although it is unclear how and when they arrived in Tunisia, she says. Her father's fair-skinned family wanted nothing to do with her parents' marriage. When her mother got pregnant, things only got worse. My paternal grandmother used the N-word in Tunisian Arabic, says Garfi, now 25 and a freelance translator. She said she couldn't believe my mother would give birth to a monkey. In the language of the Arabians, which happens to mirror some form of daily life, like it is with the verbal background of every human, the deep-seated racism is revealing. There are a number of racist expressions used on people with dark skin. They are degrading and dehumanizing because they emphasize the superiority of people with white skin. Some of these expressions can be traced back to when the Islamic and Arab world still practiced slavery and were involved in the slave trade. These expressions have outlasted slavery and even become set phrases and figures of speech that are used daily. Black is often synonymous with a bad omen in these sayings. The colors black and white are also used as opposites to stand for good or evil, with reference to the selection of a life partner, for example, or descriptions of feelings or experiences. As in other Arab countries, few black Tunisians hold top jobs in the media, government, or the private sector. When a black journalist was tapped as a weather reporter on state TV a few years ago, he told local media he felt a responsibility to stand up also against racism. Tunisia's Law 50 aimed to do just that. Passed after years of campaigning, the 2018 legislation sets prison sentences of up to 3 years and maximum fines of nearly $1,000 for those found guilty of racial discrimination. The law also reflects changing mindsets. Today, more than 6 in 10 Tunisians agree that racism is a problem, according to the Arab Barometer survey, compared to just 6% of Egyptians, for example. But few racial discrimination cases have been filed, nor has Tunisia developed a national strategy or action plan to fight racism, rights experts say. Sometime last year, President Kais Saied's racist and xenophobic speech had incited a wave of violence against black Africans. During a National Security Council meeting on the 21st of February, 2023, the Tunisian president, Saied, had said that hordes of irregular migrants from sub-Saharan Africa had come to Tunisia, with all the violence, crime, and unacceptable practices that entails. He said this was an unnatural situation and part of a criminal plan designed to change the demographic makeup and turn Tunisia into just another African country that doesn't belong to the Arab and Islamic nations anymore. Shortly after the Tunisian president made this statement, hell and fury were unleashed on all the blacks living in Tunisia. President Saied must retract his comments and order investigations to clearly signal that anti-black racist violence will not be tolerated. The president must stop finding scapegoats for Tunisia's economic and political woes. The community of black African migrants in Tunisia is now gripped by fear of assault or being arbitrarily arrested and summarily deported, said Heba Morayeff, Amnesty International's director for the Middle East and North Africa. So far, the Tunisian authorities have sought to downplay these violent attacks and even deny them altogether. Authorities should prioritize the investigation of incidents of police violence against black migrants, put an immediate end to forcible returns currently underway, and prevent any further racially motivated attacks by gangs or state agents. For 2 weeks, the authorities denied racist violence against black Africans had occurred. After the international outcry provoked by the president's comments, the authorities announced new measures on 5th of March to facilitate the legal residency of migrants, as well as a process of repatriation for those wishing to voluntarily leave the country. But the attacks and violence have continued. Amnesty International interviewed 20 people in Tunis, among them 5 asylum seekers and 15 undocumented migrants from Cameroon, Sierra Leone, Ghana, Nigeria, Guinea, and Ivory Coast. They were all attacked by mobs, and in at least 3 cases, the police were present but failed to intervene to stop the attacks or arrest the perpetrators. Since the beginning of February, Avocats Sans Frontières, ASF, an organization providing legal aid to asylum seekers and migrants, has confirmed at least 840 black African migrants, students, and asylum seekers rounded up in several cities in Tunisia. Many of those interviewed said that violence and hostility against black people were a regular feature of their life in Tunisia. However, 20 witnesses said the attacks escalated after the president's speech. Witnesses described to Amnesty International how, after the president's speech, Tunisian men, sometimes armed with batons and knives, had taken to the streets of the capital and attacked them or raided their houses. On the 24th February, Manuela D., 22, a Cameroonian asylum seeker, was stabbed in the chest, causing horrific injuries. She was attacked by a group of 6 men who shouted racist insults at her. She told Amnesty International that she was in Ariana neighborhood in Tunis, outside a cafe, when she felt a violent blow on the neck. She fell on the ground and heard voices shouting, in French, "Go back home, you gang of blacks, we don't want you here." When she woke up, she was in the hospital, covered in blood, her clothes torn. She had a long, open wound on her right breast and other injuries to her abdomen and her lips. She shared with Amnesty International a photo taken that night, showing the injury sustained to her breast. Aziz, 21, from Sierra Leone, told Amnesty International that he came to Tunisia in June 2021 to work as a construction worker. He said that a few days after the president's speech, 10 Tunisians came to his house in Ariana, broke the door, stole his things, and forced him and his family out. He said the people who attacked and shoved him and his wife said, "All black people must leave. They don't want to see us. They don't want us here. They took our money, even our food. They said we don't want any black people. Go back to Africa." In 8 cases, migrant workers and asylum seekers said that they had been forced out of their homes by mobs and that their belongings had been either stolen or destroyed. 10 told Amnesty International that they had been expelled by their landlords after authorities threatened to punish anyone hosting or employing illegal migrants. Some of those interviewed were staying in unhygienic conditions in a makeshift camp in front of the International Organization for Migration in Tunis, with no access to food except some distributed by volunteer citizens groups, or a toilet or warm clothes, having lost all their belongings. Several witnesses had said they were assaulted and arrested by the police. Milena, a student from Burkina Faso, reported that she was subjected to physical and verbal attacks by the police. She told Amnesty International that she was coming out of the supermarket on the morning of 3rd of March, when 3 Tunisian men standing nearby began to insult her, telling her to leave the country. A passing police car then stopped, but instead of addressing the men, asked her to produce her residency permit. She replied that she was a student and produced her school documents. However, she was immediately handcuffed, forced into the police car, and taken to Ariana police station. She said, "When I got to the police station, one policeman shouted at me saying, 'You blacks create problems,' and another one kneed me in the stomach." 4 hours of detention had passed before Milena was finally released after a Tunisian woman whom she knew came to vouch for her. Jomo, 30, a construction worker from Côte d'Ivoire, told Amnesty International that on 5th of March at about 8 p.m., he was sleeping in a house in Spax that he shares with 5 others when he heard a loud bang on the door and a group of around 10 men broke in. They were armed with batons. Some forced 2 of my flatmates out and beat them until they fell on the floor. Others started destroying everything in the house. They took the money and phones of some of us. The National Guard came 30 minutes later. They didn't arrest the assailants, but instead handcuffed us and took us to their headquarters. He said that he had been arrested along with 25 others that night, including an 8 months pregnant woman. The following day, all 25 were taken to court, but they were freed in the afternoon without trial. Jomo said that the landlord told them they cannot come back to the house. At the time of the interview, he was living rough on the street. Amnesty International reviewed recent videos and photos taken from inside Ouardia, a detention center in Tunis, showing security agents beating migrants. In one video, officers forcefully dragged a black man down a flight of stairs. In fact, hundreds of black Africans were intimidated into returning to their own countries. At least 300 Malians and Ivorians were returned to their countries as part of what was described as a voluntary evacuation. There is a geographic dimension to slavery and anti-black racism in the Arab world. Black-white relationships differ in Saharan zones versus northern non-desert zones of Maghrebi countries, largely based on the historical roles in economy and society that enslaved black Africans and their descendants have played in the two zones. Slavery was crueler and more brutalizing, and contemporary anti-black racism has been harsher in the southern Saharan zone than along the Mediterranean. Slavery has also lingered in the Saharan zone until the present day. Demographically, blacks in the Maghreb are concentrated in southern desert regions. In the southern zone, such as the oases of southern Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, and Morocco, we find black populations that reach as high as 75% of the population. That number is probably higher in Mauritania and among the nomadic Amazigh or Berber, Tuareg, who roam the Sahara across state boundaries. Unlike in northern areas of North Africa, where enslaved blacks were largely exploited as household servants and concubines in the Saharan zones, they were central to the economy. Indeed, a black slave mode of production emerged in the Sahara, and the slavery in the area, which has not yet completely ended, is brutal, hereditary, chattel slavery in which black people are treated as property. In the Saharan zones of North African countries, slave labor, not wage labor, dominated, and as Mosley Finley has noted, slavery is transformed into a more exploitative and brutal version when slaves play an essential role in the economy. In closing, let's break free from the illusion of separation. Our differences, cultural tapestries woven from 1,000 threads, are what make humanity a masterpiece. Racism is a stain, a tear in this beautiful fabric. Let's mend it together, thread by thread, with understanding, empathy, and the knowledge that beneath the surface, we are all connected. We are all threads in the same magnificent story, a story waiting to be written in the language of unity and love. That brings us now to the end of yet another interesting video segment. Did you happen to enjoy it? Then drop your thoughts in the comment section below. We are always delighted to pick from them. Support our works also by only hitting that like button in front of you. Share with your families and friends to keep spreading our eye-opening black narrative, and kindly subscribe to keep getting notified for more, whilst your stay also helps in building the rising membership of this channel. We are very glad to have you with us. Thank you for watching.